We're looking live at Washington once again, slightly different angle for you of the beautiful Capitol building. And that's our focus today as proceedings get underway this afternoon in the U.S. Senate for Donald Trump's impeachment trial, his second. Senators are set to hear arguments over whether even holding the trial is constitutional. Trump is accused of inciting insurrection when he whipped up a mob before the January 6th attack on Congress. He will be the first former president to be tried for high crimes and misdemeanors in the Senate. He's also the first president to be impeached twice. With us this morning, Alex Panetta, one of our correspondents in our CBC News Washington bureau. There's Alex. Good morning.
Good to be here.
Lovely to see you on these milestone moments. Alex has done a new analysis piece that's up for you on CBCNews.ca, incidentally, framing these proceedings today as a multi-front battle for the soul of the Republican Party. So let's dig into that, Alex, because I know you've been speaking to Republicans. What's the mood of the party right now?
Well, it's mostly fear of elected members, fear of their own supporters. I think, one of the things that struck me when I talked to people in some of the districts where the members had voted to impeach a few weeks ago. You'll recall that roughly 5% of Republicans voted to impeach the president, 11 Republicans in total. Well, I spoke to people in their districts, and they spoke to me about the absolute fury that these decisions were met with. They were getting phone calls from their constituents, 25, 30 to 1 against the decision they'd made. And so this is what Republicans who want to criticize Trump are walking into. And I think it's really interesting to see the dichotomy between what happens behind closed doors and what happens in public. You'll recall that last week, Liz Cheney, Representative Cheney, faced a vote to strip her of her leadership role. And everyone in public was saying, she's going to lose. And then when you ask Republican electeds by secret ballot, what do you think should happen? She survived the impeachment vote by 3 to 1 practically. And then if you have a vote in public, I'm pretty sure that would be a different result. So it kind of tells you a little bit about the mood in the party, where basically this is Donald Trump's GOP so far. But like I said, there are multiple fronts in this battle.
That's so interesting because, it ties in with what we've seen since January 6th in the riot. At that time, Republican leadership seemed ready to just break from Trump. Mitch McConnell spoke out very strongly. 10 Republican lawmakers in the House voted for impeachment. And then came the Senate, and all but 5 backed a motion to block the trial. So is that fear again, or what are we seeing?
Well, there are a few things at play. One of them is that fear. So, you referred to the events of early January where Republicans seemed like they were ready to dump Trump. Within hours, it became clear that this was not going to sit well with the base of the party. Like, you had members being harassed in airports. You had people facing censure motions from their own supporters back home, being threatened with primaries. So clearly they realized very quickly that this wasn't going to work very well. So now you have this vote on whether this is constitutional. Now, I would say that the jury is still out on whether this thing will survive a court challenge. In American history, 2 people have been impeached, a judge and a senator. A judge and a senator had been impeached by the House of Representatives and then faced a trial after they left office. And the Congressional Research Office, which basically analyzes a whole bunch of different issues for elected members, says it's not clear exactly whether it's constitutional or not. So anyone who tells you they know the answer, well, either they're a very, very smart constitutional expert or they're kind of bluffing. So what happened to date is you had the vast majority of Republicans saying that they would vote that they disagreed with the constitutionality of this measure, which is going to be voted on again after some debate today. Now, only 5 out of 50 Republicans say this is constitutional. Now, that tells me 2 things. Number one, it's extremely unlikely that Trump will be convicted because you need 17 Republicans to vote for a conviction, for him to be convicted and then barred from ever seeking office again, which would be a huge deal. So 5 out of 17 is not going to get you there. However, there's another potential wrinkle here, and this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I'm not predicting that this is the way it's going to play out, but it's a possibility. If you had a few Republicans saying, well, I'm washing my hands of this. I don't believe it's constitutional. I'm not even participating. I'm not going to dignify it with my presence. If you had 10 or 12 Republicans doing that, well, suddenly you wouldn't need 17 to convict anymore because the 2/3 rule applies to those present. It's not those, it's not all Republican senators who have to, who are taken into account. It's 2/3 of Republican members present. So if you had a dozen Republicans not showing up and 5 voting to convict, suddenly Trump is convicted. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying it's a technical possibility.
Intrigue, abstentions, or not showing up. That's a whole other scenario that, as you said, I mean, I haven't heard that posited anywhere, Alex. So very interesting. Obviously, because we've said the 2/3 to convict, and then the simple majority to get the opportunity to sanction him to prevent him from ever running again for president. So apart from that scenario, which you're saying you're not predicting, but other scenarios, do you see in any other scenario Republicans joining with Democrats?
I'm certain some Republicans will vote to convict. Well, probably those 5, maybe a couple more, maybe a little less than 5. But I'd say 5 is a pretty good benchmark. And anything more than 5, I think, would be surprising. But like I said, if you had 5 voting to convict and 10 saying, or 12 saying, I'm washing my hands of this, I don't want to participate in this unconstitutional sham. Essentially, what that would be doing would be punting it to the courts. Trump would be convicted. And then you'd basically be asking the court to weigh in on whether this was constitutional or not, which I think would be an intriguing outcome. I think it's unlikely, but to me, that's the only way you get to a conviction.
Okay. What is history seeing here? Because I know you've been speaking with a historian, notably about this moment for the Republican Party. And from that conversation, what has stood out for you?
So, I spoke to a gentleman by the name of Jeff Cabaservice, who wrote this great book on the history of the Republican Party called Rule and Ruin. And it kind of walks you through the party's evolution from essentially a coalition into a conservative party. And what's fascinating is people complained about American politics 50 years ago. It was too boring. People used to say that the parties were too similar, and they were. They were, frankly, coalitions of regional and ideological interests. And so this book starts off with a look at the Republican Party in 1960, which is a coalition of progressives, moderates, what he calls stalwarts, basically kind of like Robert Lighthizer-style nationalists, and then conservatives. And within a decade, the conservatives started to take over the party, just basically gaining numbers, winning the nomination battle in 1964 of Barry Goldwater. And over time, this becomes a conservative party. And what he's saying now is the conservative era has peaked, and now you're moving into a less ideological era. It's not moving back to what it was before, but what you're getting into now is a kind of a lifestyle culture war party. A party that exists to stop Democrats from gaining power. And he says, this is getting kind of worrisome in his opinion. And I should say, he's reported very sympathetically about the Republican Party and its history. But he says he's worried now because he says that the party in the 1960s was optimistic. Conservatives believed that they were ascendant, that they could win elections. He says what's happening now is the Republican grassroots is starting to feel the game is rigged against them. As the party loses, as Republicans or conservatives lose demographic clout in the country, they think, well, the game is fixed. So if you believe that, then the end justifies any means necessary to overcome a rival that you think is cheating. And that's what we've seen over the last couple of months.
Yes.
And his view is this is a dangerous period in American political history.
Okay, really important foundation and maybe a lens maybe to look through and watch the proceedings as they get underway today. Alex, thank you very much for all of that.